By the end of this video, I want you to understand 3 advanced and relatively unknown destroyers of modern society. But first, as always, subscribe and stick around to the end to implement these tips and tricks into your life. Now, the first relatively unknown and quite scientifically advanced destroyer of modern society is plastics. And I've talked a lot about plastics on this channel, and I'm just going to essentially summarize its effects on the body and a few ways that you can actually mitigate how like the effects that plastics really have on your life. Now, you've probably heard of something known as BPA, and BPA is a plasticizing agent that's used to make plastics hard, and that's also commonly used inside of plastic water bottles. And when water is inside of plastic water bottles, BPA is quite a leachy chemical and molecule, and this means that it can diffuse from the plastic water bottle inside of the water itself, and this means that you are essentially drinking BPA, and that is an incredibly harmful thing for your body. BPA, bisphenol A, whatever you want to call it, is an hormone and endocrine disrupting chemical, specifically an estrogenic chemical, and this means that it imitates the hormone estrogen. And this means that the brain perceives that there are too high levels of estrogen inside of the body, and it will stop the release of testosterone, which is the hormone that actually contributes to the production of estrogen, and this means that your testosterone levels decrease, and this can have a plethora of bad impacts on the body, and it is probably to blame for the sort of sudden decrease in men's and women's testosterone levels over the past 50 to 100 years, which the cause of which is sort of relatively unknown. And while many people see products that are so-called BPA free, and this means that they probably don't contain BPA, and many of the plastic water bottles on the shelves in shops probably are BPA free, but the problem is that BPA is one of a group of chemicals. The bisphenols are a massive group of chemicals that range from bisphenol A probably all the way down to bisphenol Z or X. And while that may not be true, but there are definitely a few 10 or 20 chemicals in the bisphenol group. And while BPA may not be used in plastic water bottles anymore, and that may seem that the whole entire self-improvement argument of plastics are bad and stuff, the problem is there are so many other bisphenol chemicals that have horrible effects on the body. But the problem is that these massive companies that manufacture these bottles are sort of able to get away with using them because scientists don't really understand the long-term effects of these new bisphenols on the body, and that is quite a massive issue, because it just means that these massive companies can get away with stuff that they probably shouldn't do, and it means that in the long term, us as humans and us as civilians suffer a lot because we're sort of ignorant and sort of unaware of the fact that there are bad and awful chemicals inside of the water that we drink from plastic water bottles, or the sort of soda that you may drink from plastic water bottles, or whatever it is that you drink out of a plastic water bottle. It's probably going to have contained at least a few microplastics every time you swallow, and this is proved by the fact that there are microplastics inside of our bloodstream nowadays, and these, because they're not really easy to excrete, they don't really come out of our body very easily through sweat or through just excretion in general. This means that they sort of circulate around our bloodstream for an absolute age, and the problem is that it has such a bad effect on the body, and it sort of accumulates, and until there's so many molecules of microplastics that just sort of can't be excreted, it just builds up and builds up and builds up, and scientists don't really know what's going to happen when this is sort of exceeds the normal limit or whatever. It's quite a unknown thing, and that's why I say that it's quite scientifically advanced, because while plastics go a lot deeper than just BPA, it does go a lot deeper than BPA. It goes so much deeper than BPA. There are so many other chemicals in plastics that can cause so much harm to your body. For instance, PVC, polyvinyl chloride, is used commonly now to make water pipes, and while this won't apply to everyone, some people's water pipes will still be made out of copper and metals. The problem is that for newer houses, PVC is now the material of choice to make people's water pipes, and PVC is a horrible carcinogenic chemical, and while it's more of a hard plastic, you may think that water pipes aren't going to be as soft and easy to crush as the plastic water bottles and stuff. The problem is that this stuff still will leach, and while it may only be 1 to 2 molecules a year potentially that you end up drinking from your tap water, the problem is that these molecules, as I said before, these microplastics, they accumulate inside of the body, and this means that over 4 to 5 years you end up having 10 or so of these carcinogenic molecules, that can't really be gotten rid of and excreted very easily by the body, and it just ends up building up over time until your body can't really handle it anymore, and then it just suffers from a wide range of diseases that these things actually do end up causing in the long term. But the thing is, governments and companies can get away with using PVC because scientists don't understand the long term effects of PVC and many other chemicals in the plastic world just yet. And another thing is plastics are something that's incredibly cheap to manufacture. Instead of spending lots more money on glass bottles or metal bottles to put their products in, they spend their little money on plastics, and this just doesn't benefit the world whatsoever. And it's why everything around you is seemingly made of plastic. You take a look up from your computer screen or your phone right now, and you will find there are so many more plastic things around you that you previously even could have fathomed before clicking on this video. Hopefully you may realize that, like, your phone case is plastic, your phone charger, the sort of outlining insulating sheath is plastic, the desk veneer, the desk laminate that you may have is plastic, the like computer mouse and computer keyboard, it's all plastic. There are so many plastics in our environment because they're so like much cheaper and easier to manufacture compared to like non like killing you sort of products in a way. They're so much easier to manufacture compared to glass and metal and normal sort of natural products. But yeah, it's just companies are trying to find a way to increase their or decrease their unit cost per product that they make in factories and stuff. And an easy way to do that is plastics. And hopefully that's something that we can sort of eradicate in the future once scientists and stuff actually get the evidence they need to be able to like say to people that, yeah, this stuff, it kills you. Because realistically, while we know the effects of things like BPA, phthalates, polyvinyl chloride, there are so many other chemicals that are used in plastics that we still don't understand the effects of, because it accumulates in the body, and only then, once there's sort of a large enough amount, can it actually start to really impact the body in a multitude of ways. And the second destroyer of society that is relatively unknown and somewhat scientifically advanced is trans fats. Now, I've spoken a lot on this channel about fats being a good thing for you and that it's sugar that's causing the majority of your problems, but the problem is not all fats are the same. There are 4 different types of fats: monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, saturated, and trans fats. And trans fats are the fats that you really, really need to be looking out for if health is something that you care about. But the problem is, people assume that low fat products are healthier for them than potentially higher fat products. But there are 3 types of low fat products, and the first one is where the fat that has been extracted from the product to make it lower in fat is then replaced with sugar to actually make up for the loss in the taste of the product, because fat usually makes up the taste inside of a product, and when fat is then extracted, companies have to put sugar in just so that it tastes nice, and people eventually buy the products again and again and again and again. And the second type of low fat product is where the product doesn't really have that much fat in it anyway, and companies have just used it as an advertising point so that people end up buying it more. And the third type of low fat product is where the sort of product that's lower in fat actually has worse fats in it than its alternative higher fat product. And a good example of this is margarine and sort of vegetable spread, like not really butter because it's not butter, but margarine essentially. Now, margarine is one of the main things that contains trans fats. Trans fats, as we have talked about, are a destroyer of society, and out of the 4 fats that I listed earlier, they are the worst fat. If there was sort of like a descending order for the healthiness of fats, it would probably go polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, saturated, and then trans fats. And people buy margarine and vegetable spreads because they don't want to use butter, as butter is high in saturated fats because it is solid. But the problem with vegetable spreads and vegetable, like fatty kind of that sort of stuff, margarine, is that it's high in trans fats. And while it's lower in total fat than butter is, the actual fats inside of the margarine are 10 times worse than saturated fats. And while butter isn't necessarily like a really, really good and healthy thing for you, trans fats are just something that's going to destroy your body and your health. And I highly recommend that you just use normal butter instead of the vegetable spread stuff, because they contain a lot of trans fats, as to make these vegetable oils and seed oils and stuff into a solid that can be spread on toast or whatever, they have to pump hydrogen into like the vegetable oils and the seed oils, and this will turn it into a solid. But the problem with this hydrogenation process is that it turns the polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats into trans fats, which I'm not going to like try to explain it in a perfect scientific way because I don't really edit my videos all that much and it's quite complicated, but I encourage you to do your own research on this sort of topic. But trans fats, the effects on the body are that they can't really be very easily digested, and even when they are, and then they sort of utilize in the body, and fats usually make up the cell membranes of our cells inside of our body. When a trans fat is used to make up a cell membrane of like a certain type of cell, maybe it's a skin cell or a muscle cell or whatever, it can allow toxic substances to pass through the membrane of the cell, and this could potentially be the sort of microplastics and the other things that we talked about earlier in the video, and obviously that's just not going to be very good for you at all, and I highly encourage you that you just eradicate trans fats from your diet completely. And trans fats are also things that are sort of found in your sort of generic sugary snacks and products, because while sugary snacks and products don't all contain just sugar, they do contain other things like carbs and like complex carbs, fats and proteins. Trans fats are normally the things that are found inside of sort of biscuits, sweets and chocolate, because they've got to be processed quite a lot before they can actually be put onto supermarket shelves or whatnot. And the third destroyer of society that is quite unknown and somewhat chemically and scientifically advanced is tap water. Now, tap water, you've probably heard people on self-improvement talk about it in the sense that, oh, it's destroying your hormones, there are birth control hormones in the tap water, and while all of that is true to an extent, that's because all these self-improvement YouTubers only really care about testosterone. And while understandably, testosterone is incredibly important for your body and for your health, there are other effects that tap water has on your body that you need to know and you need to understand, because in many places in the world, tap water contains heavy metals like lead, aluminium, cadmium, and stuff that can like accumulate inside of your bloodstream just like the plastics. And yeah, it can just do a plethora of things to the body that just kills you essentially. These sort of heavy metals are something that's known as anti-nutrients, and this means that while they don't really have like such a negative effect on the body, lead, aluminium and cadmium, all this stuff often inhibits good nutrients from actually being able to be used and utilized inside of your body to benefit your health, and this means that obviously in the long term it ends up detrimenting your health. And there was something that I read where an increasing amount of lead inside of children's teeth has been found, and because lead is quite a cumulative poison, it can build up in places in your body and in your bloodstream, and I guess one of the places that it goes to is your teeth, and this shows that there must just be lead is in an increasing amount inside of people's tap water in society, and this is just not a good thing. I suppose it's mostly because companies will just dump their sort of sewage and their waste inside of fresh river waters, maybe inside of the oceans that end up running into freshwater systems, and freshwater systems are the water systems that end up being used to make our tap water that ends up going through pipes, going through filtration systems. But the problem is lead ions, cadmium ions, aluminium ions are so small that they cannot be filtered by these filtration systems, and this means that they go like into the water and into our tap water systems, and eventually we end up drinking them. And the amount of sort of lead, aluminium, cadmium or whatever is much higher than the regulated amount, that actually means that it doesn't really impact our health too much. And realistically, there shouldn't really be any of this stuff inside of our tap water, because it's just such a bad thing. I'm almost lost for words in a way at how society has sort of let this happen to its civilians who probably don't even really know that this stuff even exists, and that when they drink tap water, they could potentially be drinking sort of heavy metal ions that are absolutely destroying their internal systems, and they don't really even know about it. And that's just such a horrible thought for me to sort of consider. And yeah, I'm incredibly lost for words at just how we've let this happen. I've said this over and over again, but yeah, yeah. And as I said before, there are hormones inside of tap water, and this comes in the form of birth control hormones. When being taken by people who don't want to become pregnant, they'll end up being excreted from the body eventually, and this sewage, they'll go into sewage and they'll be dumped in freshwater systems, and that may eventually get into potable water and freshwater systems, which is used to make our tap water, and this means that you may find them inside of the water that you drink. And while this may not apply to everyone, some people may have really, really good water filtration systems. The problem is that there still are maybe a few hundred molecules or something inside of the water that you drink every single month. And that will, trust me, have a massive impact on your body in the long term. And it's also something that you just deserve to know about in general. The government and big companies shouldn't hide this stuff from you. And you deserve, as a person that drinks tap water, you deserve to know about the stuff that's inside of your tap water. I'm sure as a kid, you probably always wondered what was in tap water, and it probably wasn't just pure, complete H2O water. But yeah, you always deserved to know about the sort of stuff that's inside of your tap water, and that's kind of what this last section of the video is essentially for in a way. And I talked earlier about microplastics and stuff being in tap water, and for some people, specific people who have PVC tap water pipes, that is true. There are microplastics in the tap water, things like BPA and stuff, and this is because all the sort of like litter and the plastic waste that goes into the oceans and into rivers. Obviously, while stuff like BPA can leach into tap water, or not leach into tap water, but leach into the water inside of the plastic water bottles, it can also leach into like the river that it's in, the ocean that it's in, and this means that BPA and a plethora of other chemicals are able to get into tap water systems, and you eventually drink it. And while it may have minimal impact, you deserve as a person to know about it, because this stuff is in your tap water, and it's been proven so many times. People like Andrew Huberman, like many scientists who like know that things like lead, aluminium, and cadmium are inside of tap water above regulated government amounts, and you as a person deserve to know about the things that are impacting your health to such a large extent. So with that, I hope you found value out of this video, and I also recommend subscribing because I like this community of young tribal people who are willing to improve themselves so much more than they already have, and good luck.